Riefdah, hopefully you can hear me this time. I'm asking you the question, what is the plan from members of FEDUSA as far as the strike is concerned for tomorrow?
Good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Sincere apologies. The sound quality does not seem to be very well received at this stage. But on the tail end of what I have managed to hear in terms of the plan for FEDUSA affiliates embarking on the protest action tomorrow, indeed, just a slight correction. Our affiliate or our affiliates, should I say, the Public Servants Association, supported by the Hospital Services Personnel Association of South Africa, HOSPERSA, will be embarking on this joint action to demonstrate their absolute unhappiness with the offer that is on the table by government, an upward revision only by a meager 3% that had at times come with conditionalities. So in essence, there have been a number of protests held over the last couple of days, and tomorrow one of the pinnacles of the industrial action that will be taking place, the big march that is scheduled for the major metros of Cape Town, Pretoria, Durban, as well as Bloemfontein. So indeed, we have called on the might of our public service members to come out and demonstrate not only their dissatisfaction with the offer that is on the table, but equally so to stand in solidarity with those workers who had diligently and loyally fielded the frontline services at times when their service were needed most, and this is the kind of rewards that they have to be satisfied with ultimately.
So will the South African borders have any degree or level of border control management tomorrow?
Well, absolutely, with members that we have, in particular at the PSA, that is not just manning border control, but more manning home affairs, manning various sectors within education, health, and equally so from HOSPERSA, we most certainly will be anticipating an impact on the service delivery, an impact that is not one that we really wanted to engage in, but something that is necessary in order for the employer to take heed of the absolute plight of public servants, workers at the end of the day.
So the department is saying they've put measures in place to mitigate the impact of such an action, but also saying that the rules are stating that the picketing may only take place during lunch hours or tea breaks outside the premises of the employer. Is that your understanding?
That is subject to complete interpretation. Allow me, if I may, to be able to unpack the differences between the unions that have embarked on, number one, the dispute, and number two, those workers that are engaged in essential services. So whilst essential service workers will be supporting the members in solidarity within the public service that are non-essential, indeed we will be seeing an impact, and we cannot be downplaying the absolute essence that will be felt here. So most certainly we need to understand that the one is essential services that will be on their posts. They'll be joining during lunchtime for the pickets, but with the dispute that had followed consequently, it is a protected action, and at the same time we will be joined by not only PSA but equally so our members from HOSPERSA and other unions from within FEDUSA that will be standing in solidarity with this particular action. So we cannot dilute the impact of what is happening, because there is most certainly a distinction between, number one, the dispute, and number two, the rules that is governing that particular process to ensure that those that are allowed to engage in industrial action are able to do so, and those that are essential will be standing in solidarity during lunchtime. So most certainly we are moving forward absolutely with conviction.
Yeah. Some of the affiliates of PSA, as you mentioned, are in the education sector. Is there a commitment from PSA that exams, for example, will not be disrupted during the strike?
Just a slight correction once again. I'm an official of the Federation, and as FEDUSA, we have 19 affiliated unions, of which the PSA is the largest FEDUSA affiliate.
Yes.
So at this juncture, the Federation will be engaging and supporting two of our affiliates that are embarking on this particular journey, and that is the PSA supported by HOSPIRSA in light of the application that has been made, the picketing rules that will be finalized. But like with our sister federation, our unions have taken a slightly different path, and the educators have most certainly continued to remain committed to the learners. I want to remind our listeners that we do have the COVID cohort of learners that will be sitting in 2020. They were grade 10, and now 2 years later, these are the very learners that had endured the challenges of COVID. So the educators have taken a conscious decision. They have taken a moral one in support of those learners that had endured tough times then, but equally so we have to applaud those educators that are still standing firm and assisting the learners. So whilst they will still be in their classrooms, they stand with us in solidarity and support whilst we are out there. So the teachers and all the educator unions in particular from across the federations have taken that decision, but nonetheless they will be there standing by the learners and ensuring that that particular process of the National Senior Certificate examinations will continue, but as I emphasize, standing in solidarity with those that have to embark on this necessary process, even though it's not an easy task that the members have arrived at.
Yeah. And how long are you expecting this strike action to continue? I mean, I believe the negotiating table is still open at this particular point, or at least the PSA indicating that they are willing, even at this point, to go back to the negotiating table.
Well, it's conciliation at this stage where the engagements have continued, even though there's a deadlock. And, we remain open to discussions as long as they are meaningful. We have to understand that inflation currently stands at 7.7%. The employer is offering 3%. We have to take into account the rising costs of food, fuel, and more especially so the interest rate heights, the successive rates that have been increased by the Reserve Bank, and at the same time we cannot ignore the effect of Eskom, the hikes that are currently on the table, and at the same time when we take that collective injuries into account, is there really an increase in real terms for the public servants, or are we just further eroding the what little income they have, disposable income that they have? So there are many factors that we need to take into account before we can actually arrive at some of the narratives that are being fueled out there. So you have to compare apples with apples, and if there are meaningful engagements to take the matter forward, in particular on some of the elements that have found itself within the negotiations, I'm sure that our unions, as responsible as they are, would most certainly be open for engagements with the custodial authorities.
Now, as of course the FEDUSA with your affiliates PSA and HOSPIRSA, showing your solidarity with them, I mean, do you buy the explanation by government at this particular point in time, or their position, shall I say, that says we have done all we can, we have got no room to move at this particular moment? Hence, that's why they made that announcement during the medium-term policy statement that we only have 3%.
When we unpack that statement, we take into account that during the times of the negotiations, when the percentage of 0 and then consequently 1 was on the table, government officials were awarded already then with an increase of 3%. Now, the rationale behind that, I simply don't understand. But it certainly adds insult to injury for public servants. And at the same time, when the announcement was made in the ministerial handbook that was amended after the huge insult once again that government officials, ministries or ministers in particular, are absconded from paying the basic utilities, another insult when we take into account the high cost of electricity in particular. So there are numerous factors on the table here, and we cannot ignore that there have been a number of elements that have been tabled as part of the medium-term budget policy statement where there could have been a little bit of extra manoeuvring. And whilst we understand that the Minister of Finance is trying his level best to be able to contain specific matters, we're looking at government debt that has to be managed as such. But many of these issues are not issues that workers have brought about. The issues of tackling and arresting corruption, we cannot ignore that. Government fuels a narrative of bloatedness, but where does the bloatedness reside? We have called for an audit of the public service. It still has not been concluded. So there are many elements that we can look towards that has to be dealt with. And unfortunately, when you look at the runaway costs of just basic amenities, it feels as if the public servants are being given a demotion year after year. And we simply can't ignore the very nature of their work and the services that they deliver. So how can we reward them with such a slap in the face at times? We really have to find a way of managing this particular process. And I want to emphasize a study that had been concluded just last month by the Southern Centre for Inequality Studies that in essence showed and dispelled some of the myths out there that when you take into account the government wage bill that is in essence dominated by core public services, that the very professionals, FEDUSA members from the PSA, from Hospursa and other public servants are in essence providing these services. So we really have to redirect the narrative and actually applaud the public servants, but not in the way that they are being remunerated at this stage, and take a look at the real incomes that they should be deserving instead of negotiating with another derogatory element that says whilst we give with the one hand, we want to remove with the other hand. So how do you freeze critical posts? How do you want to advance an issue where you're trying to correct one injustice, but in essence you are perpetuating another? So there are a number of elements that we have to contextualize, and we have to take the honesty of the discussions into account before we actually continue to advance on a narrative that is in many ways skewed.
That was FEDUSA General Secretary Riefdah Ajam. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on tonight.